Hello, and welcome to an episode of The Living Force. Today, I will be answering a question that many people have asked me, friends and others that know I have a vast knowledge of the Star Wars universe. That question is, who was stronger, Anakin or Yoda? My job is to give you examples and give you reasoning for why I chose those examples, and so that way you can make your own conclusion, and you will hear my opinion at the end of who was actually stronger between Anakin or Yoda. My first example will be when Anakin fought Dooku versus when Yoda fought Dooku. Now granted, these are two different matches, but I will still use them because they are still both very important. First, I will talk about when Yoda fought Dooku. Now when Yoda fought Dooku, their match was very even. The striking, even their abilities in the Force. In fact, it was Dooku's idea to continue the battle in lightsaber combat as opposed to the Force. Now I can do a video on why Dooku wanted to fight Yoda at a later time. You can just go ahead and post that in the comments if you would like to see that video. I'll get to it as soon as I can, as I do have other videos I am looking forward to post in the future. But for the most part, when Yoda fought Dooku, their match was very even. In fact, Dooku even had to use a distraction to allow him to escape. In my opinion, Dooku had to use kind of a last resort, getting two unarmed and unable to defend themselves Jedi involved in the match, so that way he could escape, causing Yoda to save his fellow friends, because that is the Jedi way. Dooku then fled the battle, knowing he couldn't beat Yoda. But like I said, I can also do a video of essentially breaking down the battle and why Yoda and Dooku made the decisions they did. Now if we go to Attack of the Clones, Anakin fights Yoda by himself, and Anakin loses, but this is also because Anakin hasn't trained as good as he has, or as good as he does, I should say, in the events of Revenge of the Sith, because Revenge of the Sith takes place several years after Attack of the Clones. In Attack of the Clones, Anakin is still very young, he's still very arrogant and naive. But don't take this away from Anakin's great lightsaber combat. Anakin was very powerful. In fact, he was already on par with Obi-Wan in several forms of lightsaber combat, and he was still not even 20 years old during the events of Attack of the Clones. So Anakin was obviously very skilled. But Yoda technically didn't lose to Dooku, and Anakin lost his arm. Now, granted, they're at two different points. Yoda, who was about 900 years old at this point, and Anakin, who was about 18, 19 years old. They are two very different people and have two very different experiences. But in my opinion, Yoda would have eventually beat Dooku had Dooku not left the match. But Dooku had other plans. And again, I can make that video on why the Dooku and Yoda battle at a later time. Now, if we look at when Anakin fought Dooku in Revenge of the Sith, Anakin beats him, but Anakin isn't always using the light side. In fact, it is after Obi-Wan falls unconscious during the battle due to Dooku's abilities that Anakin actually accesses a little bit of the dark side of the Force. This is due to the fact that Anakin is angry because he was very emotional seeing his master get defeated and be left motionless at the hands of a Sith. Now granted, Anakin does get the better of him later on in the battle. Anakin wasn't always using the light side, but Anakin was also very powerful, as we know. So essentially, the dark side brought out some of the darker abilities that Anakin had. So because Anakin beat Dooku, does that mean Anakin is better than Yoda because Yoda never did? Well, essentially the match between Dooku and Yoda was a draw in my opinion, because no one really bested each other, neither in the way of the Force or in their abilities in lightsaber combat. So essentially, to me, Yoda and Dooku, their match in Attack of the Clones was basically a draw. Both of them really were equal in that sense. And Dooku did have other plans moving forward. Dooku had to keep the Death Star plans safe and make sure they didn't fall into the hands of the Jedi. So Dooku had plans, and I can make a video breaking down why Dooku and Yoda made the decisions they did in that battle at a later time. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind while thinking about this is the fact that while they were fighting, between the difference between the two battles between when Yoda fought Anakin in Revenge of the when Yoda fought Dooku in Attack of the Clones is that Dooku had other plans. Meanwhile, in Revenge of the Sith, when Anakin fought Dooku, Dooku only had one plan: to defeat Anakin and Obi-Wan, which obviously he wasn't able to do. Now, if Dooku wouldn't have had any other plans besides keeping the Death Star plans alive and not in the hands of the Jedi, I believe eventually Yoda would have won, but I can talk about that fight at a later time and break that down and maybe do a what if scenario. What if Dooku and Yoda battle? What if their battle had continued to grow and continued to progress? I can do that at a later time. But in the end, I'm going to give my answer. And my opinion is Yoda was stronger, and here's why. The reason Yoda was stronger is because he had mastered his craft at a much longer rate. And by longer, I mean over a much longer period of time. Yoda had mastered his craft, while Anakin, even in Revenge of the Sith, he was not a master, as we know, as there are many memes of that I absolutely love. But Anakin was not a master like Yoda was. Yoda had spent his near 900 years of life mastering every single aspect of the light side. Yoda was great at this, and that was why Yoda was the only Grand Master, because he spent so long harnessing and perfecting his craft over his 900 years. Anakin was still young in Revenge of the Sith, and even in Attack of the Clones. Anakin was still young, still trying to figure out his way in the universe, and trying to figure out what purpose he brought. This is why Yoda was more powerful. Yoda was much more connected in the light side of the Force than Anakin was, as we all find out in Revenge of the Sith. Yoda was so connected with the light side, in fact, he was a part of the light side for over 900 years. And I can do a video of which side I believe is stronger at a later time if you guys would like to have that happen. So you guys can just go ahead and post that in the comments below. But I hope you guys enjoy this video. Again, I go with Yoda just because of how Yoda perfected his craft over his lifetime. Anakin really never did have the time to perfect his craft until it was too late when he turned to Darth Vader, and even then, he had to change his lifestyle because of what his body had become. And I can do a video on that as well, but again, I have some other videos I do want to get to before I start getting to some, but I will get to your video recommendations as soon as I can. Anyway, guys, this has been a video of the Living Force, so thank you. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget, the Force is with you, always.